All right, everybody. Here we have it. We are back with some news about 11.2. All right, we've gotten a little bit of information. It's about the ghost of Koresh. And this is Dratno's going to cover for us some new information besides some of the things you might have heard about, along with other things you probably have already heard about, because this is actually something that everybody's been looking forward to ever since we were getting the news about 11.1.7. Everybody was like, when are we going to see anything about 11.2? So here it is. Let's get into it.
My name is Dratnos, and welcome to our initial info dump for patch 11.2 Ghosts of Koresh. There is a WoWcast you can watch about this, and there's also a 2-hour-long video with me, Squishy, and Tettles from Wowhead, and we talk about a lot of this stuff. That was actually the first time that I heard about a lot of this stuff. We recorded it yesterday, and it's up on the Wowhead YouTube. I'll link it in the description below if you want to hear some more discussion of this. This video will be a little bit shorter.
They've been doing a lot of this. So one of the things that Blizzard likes to do is when they release something, they start doing a whole bunch of dev interviews with content creators that you probably know of. So that would be very nice for those of you that want to see more of the information, because like you said, this is a 30-minute video. We'll get into it and see where we go.
Aiming for about 15 minutes, and we'll talk about all the stuff in the patch with just sort of a quick overview. And then if you want as well, I'm going to make a playlist where I will talk about all the 11.2 weekly PTR updates as they come out, because we know there's going to be class updates for Shadow Priest, Brewmaster Monk, Frost, and Holy DK as the sort of reworky sized or update sized things for some specs. And I'm sure there will be tuning and balance for a lot of the other ones. And so those will be in those videos as they come out. PTR might be soon. The PTR servers often come up the day or two after, or even the day of these WoWcasts. So that could be very soon. That could be an extra video even later today. So let's start off by talking about the Mythic Plus dungeon rotation. So we have the voted on dungeons of Dawnbreaker, Arakara, Floodgate, and Priory. Largely people, I think, voting based off of the trinket dungeons that were good for them. Then we have a new dungeon.
The devs also said that they're going to give Dawnbreaker and Arakara, City of Echoes, a pass to make sure that they are up to the standards of Season 2. So you should see a little bit more telegraphing of the spells, things like that. So there should be updates for those two dungeons right there.
Dungeon that's being added this patch, Ecodome Aldani. And then we have Halls of Atonement and the two Tazavesh dungeons, all from Shadowlands.
Glad to see it.
Should be pretty exciting. I'm not sure what the theme for Halls of Atonement fitting in is, but I do know that Tazavesh fits the ethereal theme of the patch very nicely. And also these were both sides of the Tazavesh Mega Dungeon were two of my favorite Mythic Plus dungeons. So this should be a pretty sick M plus dungeon rotation, all things considered. The most popular War Within dungeons, which actually, there are a couple of ones this season that, like the other two this season, I think I liked more than Dawnbreaker. Actually, and I didn't like Priory that much, so I'd be happy to swap this one out for maybe one of the other dungeons from this season, but that's okay. Still a very strong dungeon set, and the three best Shadowlands dungeons, in my opinion, or at least three of the top 4 or 5. Here's the new dungeon, Ecodome Aldani. It's a 3-boss dungeon, which is great. I like 3-boss dungeons. Yep. And it's going to be this ecodome like in the Netherstorm, and it's going to be after the storyline of the raid as well. So it's like the last part of the storyline, presumably of the expansion here. It's the canonical route that the storyline takes place as the campaign, the raid, and then the dungeon. Not a thing we do often, so I'm looking forward to seeing how people react to this cadence. Cool. I know a lot of people don't care as much about the story, but I think that is neat, and I'm always a fan of them doing those kinds of things. The Ecodome is an interesting place to put a dungeon as well. We haven't had a lot of these sort of green and vibrant dungeons. This expansion has been a lot of darker, dingier kind of stuff.
And I'm glad that they're making it more brighter, because one of the things that I have a hard time seeing is when you're in a dark area, it's very hard to see, and probably by design. It's very hard to see the mechanics you need to avoid if they're not properly outlined, such as Dark Flame Cleft. Very hard to see some of those mechanics in there when they are not properly outlined. That's how they get you.
Settings, which does make some sense, but it's always nice to break that up. So looking forward to seeing what this dungeon is like. Next news, there's going to be a lever penalty with a deserter-style system coming in Season 3.
Check this out.
So, at the beginning...
This shows you that Blizzard is listening, because I actually did a video of stop leaving my key, because it's one of those things, you make one silly mistake, you're not going to time it. Well, that person leaves, but the other people wanted to try and finish it. If anything, you still are working on your crest. It was more prevalent in the beginning, more so than it is now, because of the fact that you had people out there that just cared about IO. They were sweating and they were just getting all their keys done, where everybody else is kind of taking it at their own pace, working their 9 to 5s, coming home, trying to unwind, play some of these, and then people are leaving the key after a fail.
In War Within, they added a zero debuff for group finder dungeons and also banned excessive levers, although unclear exactly how many people got banned with that. But in a recent interview with Wowhead, if you want to leave a dungeon without penalty, you have to surrender vote, basically, like in League. If you leave without a successful vote too frequently, they will be marked as someone who leaves often in Group Finder. Marked players can lose the mark by successfully completing dungeons and using the vote system properly. So it's pretty similar to maybe, Dota low impact or low priority queue, something like that. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how this gets implemented, because the fact that you need to do this multiple times, right? So if this just happens to you in one dungeon and maybe the other players are there are worries about implementing a lever penalty that involve other players griefing you or griefing the key and then not refusing to actually be the first to leave and just saying, you know what, I'm like people in League of Legends who lock something weird and they're like, you gotta dodge, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna waste your 30 minutes here. And that same thing could happen in M+, right, where somebody just keeps on pulling 10 packs and is like, somebody's gotta leave, it's not gonna be me. Those sorts of things I think are a little bit less likely given the fact that you don't instantly get penalized on the first dungeon that you do this in, that you leave from. But on the other hand, if they make this number too high, then there's a decent chance the behavior, a lot of people who are leavers don't do it every dungeon. Most people who are leavers don't do it every dungeon. And a lot of the problematic behavior comes from somebody just in their worst dungeon of, say, 1 out of every 15 dungeons or something like that, they'll leave. Maybe 1 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 5. But it's tough to see how they're going to make this sensitive enough that it's actually going to catch the bad behavior and disincentivize it without making it too sensitive that people actually feel like they are really being held hostage in groups like that and incentivizing the behavior instead of pulling extra trash and refusing to leave, but also making the dungeon just awful until somebody else leaves or until everybody actually agrees on the surrender vote that you didn't like initially. So we got to see exactly how this turns out, because I've always been a little bit worried that it's going to be really hard to accomplish the goal here. But I think everybody's really excited that they're trying to do something about this, because clearly it's a problem in the group finder right now. So going after it, I think, is good. But I am still interested to see if they've found a sweet spot where it's sensitive enough to actually mark people and disincentivize the behavior without being too sensitive that it switches the griefing behavior to the other side, to using this system as the grief instead of leaving keys as the grief. We've also learned that the dead week at the start of the season is going away, kind of. It's not quite heroic week yet. It's sort of normal week, except the raid isn't open, but you can get a lot of champion track gear in the week that previously you capped out at a few pieces of veteran track gear. If you think about the first week of, say, Liberation of Undermine, where you could get like 1 piece of veteran track gear from the rep vendor or something that week, and otherwise you were just all on season 1 gear still. So you can do non-bountiful delves, heroic and baseline and mythic season 3 dungeons, and world bosses. The world boss, at least in Liberation of Undermine, dropped 1 piece of gear per warband per week, so it'll be interesting to see if that continues this season. And then also M0 dungeons, a source of champion track gear, potentially being a pretty strong way to start off your character, right? Champion track gear.
The first week of the patch always feels good for like the first couple of days, and then after that, it's just like, I'm not somebody that likes weeklies and dailies, for rep. But if they have something tied to it, like say the continuous augment rune type of thing that we had in the Emerald Dream, that's something to go for that kind of rep. But other than that, I don't care for it. I don't think it's worth my time.
Potentially is going to upgrade around that 700-ish eye level, depending on how they factor in the turbo boost in their calculations here. But that's going to be potentially a very strong way to start the season. This is still a pretty limited amount of weekly commitment, but at least it's going to feel like there's a little bit more to do than just do the campaign and then log out until next week, which it's nice that you're not under huge pressure in week 1 to grind for 16 hours a day, but it's also...
Is that how you guys feel when the patch drops? Do you feel overwhelmed or that you have to hurry up and log in or else you're going to be left behind? You know, because that first week is there just strictly as while wanting us to go to see everything they've put in the game, the story and things like that. Is it something that worries you? Let me know down in the comments. I appreciate it.
Going to be nice to have at least a little bit more to do than we did in Liberation Undermine and in most patches back in Dragonflight as well. Here's some more big news. The hero talent set bonuses. Set bonuses are going to be based on your hero talent instead of your talents, so your spec.
That's pretty
so
neat.
for instance, here's the Demolish one, which is for Colossus Prot Warriors, which are both arms and prot. Two set. Demolish damage increased by 20%, and critical strike damage of your abilities increased by up to 20% on targets affected by your Demolish for 10 seconds based on the number of stacks of Colossal Might consumed. And then the 4 set, Demolish increases the critical strike chance of your next 2 Mortal Strikes by 100%. Mortal Strike critical strikes increase your Rend and Deep Wounds damage by 100% for 8 seconds. So right off the bat, this is the Arms Colossus version of this. Clearly, the Prot Colossus one is going to have to be at least somewhat different in that it's going to have to be something other than Mortal Strike. However, it might be as simple as just turning the word Mortal Strike into the word Shield Slam, something like that. And then calling it a day, in which case, which I think is pretty likely, which would mean that the tank set bonus doesn't have any defensive benefit if it's just keying off of Demolish. And that to me is the part that's going to be really interesting is, are they just going to make tank set bonuses that don't do defensive stuff? Because the hero talents, a lot of the hero talents are buffing a single button of some kind or giving you a new button of some kind. So are they just going to make that button even better?
We'll get to see a lot of this when PTR.
And then how is it going to work for the hero talents that are hybrids between tanks and DPS? And in particular, how's it going to work for the hero talents that are hybrids between healers and tanks as well? There are a few of those for Monk and Paladin. This is going to be very interesting to see exactly how they land those hero talent set bonuses being good. But it's interesting. So I think there's a good chance that this is going to be... Also, here's some of the visuals for the set bonuses. I think there's a good chance these are going to be pretty unexciting set bonuses. When I think about what I like about set bonuses, I like set bonuses that change how my rotation plays and feels. And in particular, keying off of hero talents, I think is going to require for a lot of these hero talent trees to just further buff damage into the hero talent button. And my rotation is already press my hero talent button whenever I'm allowed to in most of these specs. So like you think about this one, the 2-piece isn't going to change really how stuff feels. I guess it's going to incentivize you to spend with 10 stacks of Colossal Might, which you already are heavily incentivized to do, and you do naturally in your gameplay. And then the 4 set is going to give you... You won't even feel this, right? It's going to increase your damage. That'd be nice. I guess you might see it if you have your damage numbers turned on a little bit, but this Arms Warrior hero talent tree is one that...
Well, I don't know that the tier bonuses have been that great. I mean, even for Undermine, I didn't really feel that they contributed a great deal, though it's always bred into us. You want to make sure you get your 2 and hurry up and get your 4. So there's benefit, of course, but how flashy are they? How much do they change your rotation? How much added bonuses are they making you feel good as a class? That kind of deal. I wonder.
That wouldn't satisfy my goal with a set bonus, gameplay-wise, of giving you some interesting gameplay. However, this might accomplish some other goals. For instance, it might bring unplayed hero talent spec combinations up in viability, which is cool, right? There could be ones that haven't been played much this expansion yet, that they can make good temporarily with a set bonus, and then hit with a rework of some kind going into Midnight. That could be an interesting way to fix some of the hero talent balance. My suspicion is that it's very unlikely we're going to move to a world where there are a lot more hero talents that are equally good as each other, but it would be a lot easier for them to move to a world where some that weren't good are now the good ones using these, which would maybe be fine. Not something I'm too concerned about personally. The other thing that it's accomplishing is just doing something new and interesting, and I'm basically always in favor of that. Even though my suspicion is this isn't a good way to do set bonuses and isn't going to make the gameplay any better, it's the first time they're doing it, and therefore I'm pretty much always interested in seeing them test that out.
It's always good for them as Blizzard goes and keeps moving expansion to expansion to keep trying to innovate the way that we're playing. You don't ever want it to be so stale when it comes to your gameplay. You want to see something new because you're going to be doing this, year after year, patch after patch. You want to try and make sure that you're going to have something new and fresh
Out and try something, and I could very well be wrong. This could be a lot of fun. One thing that's nice is that for each spec you now get two set bonuses to choose from, so that's kind of nifty, even though they only have to make the same total number of set bonuses. Although again, that's kind of fake because they do have to make the arms and prop version of the Colossus one, and actually make sure they're balanced independently. So they've sort of bit off double the work of.
So just thinking about what he said right there, does that mean, are you guys taking it that when we go to pick our pieces and you're a paladin, you want to make sure you're getting one for your ret, and then you have to try and make sure that you're not doubling up and picking one for your prot, or you're not picking the prot one when you're trying to play ret? Is that kind of what he's saying?
Balancing and maybe 1.1 times the work of designing the set bonuses this tier. All right, up next, Tazavesh hard mode. So we know M0s are coming back next patch, as usual. But Tazavesh is not going to have M0 difficulty of its two sides of the raid. And instead, it's going to have the hard mode version that existed back in Shadowlands as a mega dungeon that is difficulty similar to a +10, maybe with loot similar to a +10, although they haven't exactly locked in whether it's going to give +10 vaults and stuff. I think it really should. They did this sort of with Dawn of the Infinite, and it didn't give the vaults, and that kind of sucked. And I think it'd be really huge if it did give the vaults, maybe 2 dungeon vaults, right? One for killing Soasmi and one for killing Solia. And I think that would be
interesting.
I think that'd be really good. So I hope they do actually pull the trigger on that. And then giving you a untimed but much harder tuned than M0, and with difficulty and mechanics that don't exist in M+. And they are going to do some mechanical differences that didn't exist in the first hard mode compared to M+ of Tazavesh. So for instance, the Codebreaker boss Hilbrand is going to be only doing the coordination check in hard mode. In M+, it's gonna just show you the code to everybody. But in hard mode, it's gonna do the same thing that it used to do, where each player has to collect one part of the code to let you know what to do with that one. So I think that's a really interesting way to do this. I'm actually a really big fan of offering a parallel untimed experience to M+, that gives comparable loot to M+. The M+ loot of hero track from end of dungeon, myth track from the week, like once per vault. I don't think we need to gatekeep that behind just doing M+. I think if you can do these mega dungeons, it's going to be less efficient than doing M+, if you're an efficiency-minded player. But if you're somebody who just wants to do dungeons but doesn't want the time pressure, if you want to play with your friends and you want a more relaxed but also difficult experience, right? Like not relaxed in the sense of face rolling the content, but relaxed in the sense.
Another thing for that boss he was talking about, there used to be a weak aura. So thank God add-ons aren't gone. You'll be able to get the weak aura. It'll tell you what code to get, and you'll be done with this in no problem. No time.
So if you make a mistake, it's not like you've wasted a huge amount of time. You've only wasted the time that the mistake cost you, right? That is, I think just a mode that removes time pressure. There are a lot of players for whom the time pressure just affects something in your brain that makes things less fun. For me, I'm not like that. For me, the time pressure makes things more fun. But having a version that takes that away, I think, is really cool. And I'd love it if we moved to a world where this was a completely parallel track to M+, where you had multiple hard mode, non-timed dungeons you could do, or you could do them on M+. They have less of those coordination mechanics, and instead they have the infinite scaling and the timed mode. I think that would be really, really cool. So I hope that they expand further on this, and I hope this is a big success, and I definitely hope that they give these the vaults. Next,
that would be too hard for, I think, the devs to do, and I don't think they ever would. Next
news, we have an upgradable artifact cloak coming in 11.2, so don't use your dinars on the raid cloak. If you're thinking about, if you have a close choice on your last dinar, don't buy a Test Pilot's Go pack, because you are replacing that thing real quick here with the Reshi wraps. So these are basically ethereal wraps, like the bindings that ethereals use, I guess. And that's going to be used to do a new outdoor world activity called phase diving. And also, you use it in the new Delve dungeon and raid. Use it in the raid as I think just you use it to get inside the raid. It's unclear what it's going to do in dungeons, and it also has some interaction with the seasonal Delve mechanics. And then you can upgrade it, which is similar to previous legendaries, but it is a warbound upgrade system from familiar content, complete with a catch-up system.
Very
perfect.
Nice.
There are a lot of ways that you can make artifact upgrade systems that, especially when we see Ashura Kama's Shroud of Resolve, this, for the first few months of existing, was a huge barrier against playing an alt, because you'd look at it and you'd be like, oh man, I have to kill N'Zoth and do a Horrific Vision every week to get...
And you had to get all the vessels. So you couldn't just enter Horrific Visions. You had to go on every single alt, do all of the chores to get the vessel. You could only get 3 a week. So you tried to get 3 on all your alts to then go back into Horrific Visions, try and do the best you could through Orgrimmar and Stormwind to come back and, level it up one at a time, up to 15. Oh my God, that was a slog.
Get 2 upgrades instead of 1 until I catch all the way up. That's going to take me many, many months of doing a lot of content that I don't want to do on my alt, right? A lot of alts didn't want to do N'Zoth every week, or they didn't want to do a Horrific Vision every week. I wanted to do a Horrific Vision every week. I didn't want to do N'Zoth every week on all my alts, and you had to if you wanted to catch up if you were behind on a Ashura Kama's. So it's nice that that's not going to be how the Reshi wraps work, and instead it's going to be the opposite kind of thing where it's going to encourage you to play an alt because you've already got a good Warbound Reshi wraps on that character. One of your gear slots is already good, right? It's sort of like having some good Warbound gear to send to your alts, except it's all your alts, and it's a slot that, of course, everybody uses. So I think this is going to be really...
Kind of the same thing that we're having to do right now with the disc belt. So, if you have alts, you go in there and you keep running the overcharged delve and you're working on your console. There's like no downside. This is kind of like the one thumbs up and kudos I'm going to give the Blizzard on the Warbound stuff here. This has been a great help, because then you can get that belt, which starts at that 691 item level for all of your alts, and you're still progressing towards, if you mainly just do one character, you're still progressing through the console, which is great work.
Really, really great. It makes sense, right? Like, I wish they do these things by default with the mid-patch systems as well as the main patch systems, but I'm glad that they're doing it. It seems like in a really, really friendly, like this seems like the friendliest version of this that they can imagine, so hopefully it actually does have no weird stuff, and I'm sure if it does, they'll patch it quick. Next news is dungeon checkpoints are getting improved in 11.2 with Waystone. So this is very similar to Delve dungeon checkpoint updating, except instead of updating your checkpoint by walking near a Waystone, they spawn on bosses dying still, which I think is good. So and you'll see where the newest Waystone is when you look at your minimap, and you basically get this big feedback that says, hey, your graveyard's been updated. This is now where you're going to release.
That's basically what they have in Delve. So once you get to that companion meeting stone, if you die past that, you'll just res back there. If you know it, you've probably played it more than I have. So that's going to be implemented into the dungeons now, which is going to be great because we've always complained about the run back time and things that took us, because you're always against that clock in Mythic Plus. You're definitely trying to not waste so much time and having to worry about pulling any mobs that you might have skipped on the way. That's always been something, especially for people that aren't used to playing in Mythic Plus, very daunting. Do I release? You're asking, but now you know where you release. That's good to me.
I think this is really good. I've always been a fan of. I've been against the inconsistent nature of dungeon checkpoints, where when you kill a boss, sometimes your graveyard updates and sometimes it doesn't. And the only way to know, which they recently added a little chat message that would go in your bottom left, that'd be like, hey, here's your checkpoint is updated or whatever. But that is pretty easy to forget, and 10 minutes later when you're killing a boss, Did the last boss do that or not? No way to know, right? Unless you actually have it memorized, which I've always been somebody who's good at memorizing that kind of stuff, but I've always felt like that was a silly thing to make part of the skill of M plus, is just having like an encyclopedic knowledge of which bosses update your graveyard and which ones don't, and which runbacks are good and which ones aren't. So making this something that you don't have to memorize and you can instead pop open your map when you die and see where's the waystone, should I release, is a really, really good step forward. And it'll be easy to remember as well whether one of these big things popped up and where the most recent one was probably. So huge, great system, very similar to the Delve system, and I've been a huge fan of doing this. So big W from me. Up next, some speculation about void-themed demon hunters. We see that there is going to be a mysterious council of demon hunters.
I swear to God, if they bring this to fruition, I've been asking for void demon hunters forever. Ever since the void elf was introduced. I think it's amazing. If they do this, I am definitely going to swap over. So please let it be true that they are a playable race.
Hunters who found their way onto Koresh. But demon hunters only have 2 specs, and there's 3 demon hunters. Now, one of these looks kind of vengeance-y, one of them looks kind of havoc-y. I guess they could both be either havoc or vengeance, really. But what is... I guess, this one's the light armor, this one's the vengeance demon hunter with the Aldrachi blaze instead. So yeah, this one looks havoc-y, this one looks vengeance-y. This one looks voidy, ethereally, kind of, Koreshi. These are sort of like
look at those.
Like Nexus Princess Kaiveza's weapons, the fist weapons for the very rares from last season. So is this Blizzard teasing a new spec in the raid for demon hunters? That is the question. There's not really answers here. There's just some more speculation. So if you want to read this, I will link the article.
That would be fucking amazing.
But in fact, I'll link all these articles down below. So there's gonna be a lot of links in the description below if you want to catch up on all these things as well. But I think this is definitely a possibility. The last spec that they added in the middle of, after a class came out was Augmentation Evoker, which was also teased in the raid, right? Sarkareth had Aug Evoker abilities and, buffed the ads and stuff. And that was where Aug sort of came from-ish. There's experiments on Evoker in the Evoker-themed raid. Now, this isn't a Demon Hunter-themed raid, but this could still be a cool way to sort of soft launch a new spec, identity existing. And I think a Void-themed Demon Hunter would be really cool. It would be really sweet to have an extra spec as well. And it could sort of explain why the Demon Hunter hero talent trees are kind of stinky, is because they're temporary until they add a third spec and they have to redo the triangle for the hero talents. So that's some double tinfoil about that. Anyways, it's a cool theory. We'll see if it ends up coming true. I'm going to be very interested in what this boss's abilities are, so we can sort of see if there are any hints that they might be interesting player abilities like the Sarkareth Aug Evoker one. Speaking of the raid, we have some info that Manaforge Omega raid contains WoW's biggest boss ever, with the last boss here, Void Lord Dimensius, this isn't actually a fight that occurs in Stormwind here. I think they just put it next to Stormwind for size comparison. So this is the boss, and this is the city of Stormwind. That is quite a large boss. I don't know how we're going to fight it.
It's going to be just like Final Fantasy XIV. If you've ever seen some of those fights, you might not play the game. They have bosses this big, and they're at the end of the platform. They're at the end of the platform. They're doing their spells. You're countering. You're dancing. You're damaging. It's that.
Meaningfully at this size, but it should be a lot of fun. And I don't know. It should be cool. I imagine at this size, I'm thinking dragon riding, because I'm thinking Tindral was a boss that probably had a similar size to this, and just traversing a boss of this size seems like something that you'd need that for. But it's either that or like you shrink it down somehow, or you're portaling around, or you're just fighting on a little platform and you're seeing a big dude. But I don't think they would make a big deal about the size of the fight if it was cosmetic size only. So we will see exactly how that works out. There are some other bosses that were revealed during the Wowcast episode as well. A warden protected the entrance pipes. armies of ethereals still being wrapped, a moth-like creature from which ethereals extract silk from their wrappings, and then the two that we've just talked about, the Council of Demon Hunters and the cosmic battle with Dimensius. We've also learned that the Reshi Wraps, in addition to letting us get in the raid, they actually do have a special ability that would interact with other encounter mechanics of the raid. So we'll see how that works out. Hopefully it's in an interesting way, and not in a super cringy way.
It's supposed to be some kind of void phasing. When I was listening to the WoW head cast or whatever that was that they had with that chick and the designer or the director actually. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they encounter that.
Okay. I guess that's kind of always the hope with everything. So that didn't add too much value to this.
Yeah, that's the one that I saw. Bethany Hudson, Drew D'Souza, and it doesn't have. I want to say it was Stephanie Yoon.
Video, that particular thought, but yeah, we'll see how this works out. Whether it's something, I guess like a coherent through line extra action button through the raid, or what exactly these Reshi Wraps end up doing inside the raid and in the dungeons as well. There were some other interview questions as well. They've talked a little bit about threat, which TLDR there is they kind of agree there are some problems, but they, then they sort of defended the philosophy of why threat exists, which that philosophy is great. It's just they need to still, fix some of the pain points that exist with it. Then some discussion about the dungeons, the stop changes, resilient keys. Then there's another interview they did where they talked about Gallywix's difficulty, secret phases, some difficult just raid design thoughts, especially as we're in the lead up to the add-on, nerfing happening at some point in the next decade, whenever they decide to pull that trigger, and the, mechanical complexity discussion in a world potentially without add-ons, and some talk about the Mythic Raid lockout, Dimensius as well. If you want to read all this, I'm going to link these two interviews down in the
and I will link
below.
The video,
and also
and
the
look at
2-hour video of me, Squishy, and Tettles talking about basically all of these interview questions and answers, so you can get a lot more opinion in that video. Finally, we have some delve and outdoor world casually kind of content stuff. Although I've done a lot of delves myself over the years. This season I'm gonna be getting the 1,000 delve achievement at some point during season 3, not during season 2. And so Nexus Princess Kaiveza is the new underpin. Awesome.
Oh, really?
Very excited to Nexus Princess Kaiveza. Great character, great boss fight. Can't wait to see what happens in the delves with the Nexus Princess as the new nemesis. There's also a new delve, which is the Archival Assault, which is inside the Azure Vault. Great way to do delves. I mean, if you think about scenarios back in MoP, which I guess is a lot of people are going to experience maybe for the first time when MoP Classic comes out, but a lot of these would happen inside various dungeons. And I think this is a really good way to use a thematic, cool location that they've designed in the past and get some more, bang for the buck out of these locations that they've already made. So yeah, that should be fun. Delve inside the Azure Vault.
Content
then we have so here's some information about the Reshi Wraps and delves. Is you use it to unlock special rooms, boss rushes, unique challenge rooms. Sick. Love that idea. And you'll be able to interact with friends who are delving with you, leaving messages or checking their deaths. Very similar to Elden Ring. Yeah. Seeing the ghosts of other players and leaving little signposts or whatever potentially for them.
I actually bought Elden Ring. I played it for like a week and I'm like, this game is not for me. I felt like I died all the time and had to keep going back for my Stygia, which is your grace. But I always called it Stygia because it did nothing but remind me of the Maw. But it did this. So you would go along your travels and you would see these little plaques on the ground and you could click on them. Some of them were to give you advice, trouble ahead. Remember, don't do this. Others were there just to fucking troll you. They'd be like, you're gonna die, noob. Shit like that. Which, is funny.
Love that. I think that's a really fun way to... I mean, this is obviously a lot easier than Elden Ring, but it should still be fun if you could see people, getting killed in certain spots. Although, the thing about Elden Ring is you'd see people getting killed, like, the ghost fighting or dying in a spot, and it's like, oh yeah, they died to this mob here. Whereas in Delves, the mobs randomize every time a little bit, so you wouldn't know, like, oh yeah, they died to that really hard mob here. But still, it'd be really funny to see. I'm going to see if I can set up some fun delve messages with that. So yeah, cool. Other outdoor content coming is phase diving, which is again tied to the legendary cloak or the artifact cloak. And Basically, you can transform into a being of pure energy, going into a new phase within Koresh, and it's an overlay across all of Koresh, features exclusive content such as exclusive objective, world quests, rare mobs, mechanics, and more. One feature is also called Warrants, which is missions for the Constable of Tazvesh, where you'll hunt down monsters that can only be encountered in phase diving. And players in your group can see you phase diving, allowing you to do things such as leave message them or even check where they died. So sort of similar to like entering the rift in the Maw, the zone south of the Maw, Korthia, that had that other phase with different stuff in it, although hopefully not as annoying to enter and time-based before you get yanked back out. And then...
I don't remember.
Okay, yeah, there's actually... Again, we know that it's going to matter in dungeons and raids as well. We don't know how it'll do in dungeons, and we still don't know in raids. The only example they gave is entering the raid still. So, yeah, and then actually they mentioned the Korthia Rift here as an analog as well, which, yeah, a different layer inside of Realm. Should be interesting. Should be cool to see how this works out. The Korthia Rift thing was actually, it was kind of fun, but it was definitely different. Like, that was time pressure. That was elite mobs down there. That was something very different than I think hopefully phase diving is going to land. Another feature that's outdoor worldy, ecological succession. Basically, the Ecodome, presumably the one that's the dungeon, but maybe a different one, you're going to fill it with some wildlife. So we'll work alongside Venari, who was in the Maw, that was the ethereal in the Maw, to bring life back to Koresh. Although Koresh has been ripped apart by Dementius, Venari believes we might be able to bring life back to what remains using a new Ecodome. So you'll go bring animals from around Azeroth, experiment with them to see if they can survive in the Koresh ecosystem, hoping to get some life back to what remains of Koresh. Not a lot was revealed about it, but yeah, this seems fun. I think certainly this is something that's likely to be where you get some of the mounts and pets from this patch, but this seems kind of cool, kind of nifty. Maybe you're going back to old zones and collecting these various, animals to bring them to the ecodomes. Yeah, cool. That's it for this video. Let me know what you think of all of these things, and also, again, check the other sources for more info about all of these different upcoming
like I said, I will go ahead and I will
features.
I'll link the video down in the description, and then you'll be able to see, because there's a long list. I was thinking about covering this myself. There's a long list of all these Wowhead links to the information that he was going over. Now, this is a much shorter video than the 2-hour one that he did with Petals and
going after dungeon levers seems like definitely a strong one. Making that dead week a little bit less dead.
I apologize. Anyways, it's a 2-hour video, and then there's all the Wowhead
seems very strong.
Warcraft videos. Check it all out. Check it all out. I'll try and include a few of them if I can. So you'll see that there, and I really think it'll be something to look forward to.
It's fantastic. Let me know what you think, though. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.
There you have it. There you have it.
Are you currently?
So we're gonna go to Koresh. We're gonna go to Koresh and see what's left. What's left there. Anyways, at any point, I hope to see you all there with me. So keep your head on a swivel and be good to one another. I'm outie.